Hey y'all, what's up? It's Chemistry, and today we're going to be talking about everything that the title says, but aside from that, let's get it popping, shall we? Now, originally I was going to record this in my office, but I don't necessarily have everything together in my office as I'm still organizing and reorganizing and packing and unpacking some things. But I've been wondering about this topic for, I'm talking years. I was always wondering what's race? What's culture? What are specific things? Like, what are all of these things? Also, today is retwist day. So that's why, it's like some of these are locks and some of these are not. That's why. So, in order to fully understand it, I really had to break it down into multiple sections. But first and foremost, I'm going to be talking about like the origins of where we come from. So, so yeah. All right, mm, so it all starts in the very beginning, right? So a lot of people will be like, it came from the Binky Bonky, and then it was three kinds of humans, and then pow, humans were made. No, not at all. So, and the reason why I say that is because according to scientists and all in the hypothesis that they make or are still making, we all have a common ancestor. Everybody of different races, we all have a common ancestor. So according to those scientists, our common ancestor is mitochondrial Eve. Now, mitochondrial Eve is as young as 7,000 and as old as 150,000 years old, right? And on top of that, she was a black woman from East or West Africa. Hey, I ain't say it. The scientists said it. And it doesn't make it any better that he did make Adam and Eve from the dust of the ground or the dust of the earth. And what color is that? We all know what happens with Adam and Eve, and a lot of people be like, oh, she got kicked out because she ate a fruit and ba 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 ba. Because the devil literally came in disguised as a snake for one. If he would have came in as a hippopotamus, it would have been different. But he didn't come in as a hippopotamus. He came in as something that was natural to that environment. He came in as something sneaky as cunning. And on top of that, he talked Eve out of her own identity and gave her an inferiority complex to the point of where she's sitting there thinking, oh, if I eat this big, fat, juicy fruit, I can be like God. When in reality, she didn't realize that her and Adam were made in the image of God to begin with. So that happens, right? They have kids. Cain kills Abel. Their kids have kids. Their kids have kids. Their kids have kids. Enoch is here. God snatches up Enoch. Their kids have kids. Their kids have kids. Their kids have kids. And here is Noah. I don't know everything that happened pertaining to the flood. And then also there was a marine biologist. The same guy that discovered the Titanic. He was like, oh, what if Noah's Ark happened? To me, I feel like, to me as a Christian, I obviously feel like it happened. So it is approximately 3 something in the morning. And my sleep schedule is out of whack. And I still have not retwisted my hair. Like, just pure procrastination. And that's already problematic within itself. But I was meaning to say that I had to go back and make sure that, what I was using was accurate. But there was another person that debunked the original thing that I was going to use, right? So now I'm just like, okay, so I can't find like any like bam evidence, right? So the first thing I do typically, if I can't find any video proof or video evidence or whatever the case may be, right? I always listen to people's word of mouth about that situation. And if there is a strong similarity, even though the stories are different, it's a possibility that it happened. Because it's just like the saying goes amongst, not just the black community, but other communities as well. Like, not everybody lying. Let's just say something problematic happened, and you have 49 people that experienced the same thing or similar. All 49, maybe a few people within that 49 are lying, but not everybody in that 49 is lying though. So everybody knows about the whole thing that happened with the flood, right? So some people are like, that's a lie, that's a lie. So, prime example, the flood came first. But in every single culture that is on this earth, there is a extremely similar story or incident of a worldwide flood happening. Because I feel like a lot of people forget that even though evidence and research is a one of the most goated forms of evidence that you can give when it comes to stuff like this, people often forget that if many people and many cultures share extremely similar stories or word of mouth, it goes from just being taka 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 to being, oh, it is a possibility that all these people are saying essentially the same thing. It's a possibility that thing happened. So around this time, a whole year or so passes by. They land on Mount Amarat, right? And they were just like, okay, yeah, everything's over, yeah. So next thing you know, oh my goodness. So next thing you know, Noah gets drunk. He's in a tent. He is naked. He's naked and afraid, like the show. We're not afraid. He's just vulnerable, but still. So Ham and Canaan, by technicality, Ham had saw him, had saw him in the tent. And instead of just covering his daddy up, not only did he see somebody in their most vulnerable state and not help them or be nice to them, he took that opportunity to be messy boots. So he went back and told his brothers, like, look, dad is drunk. Literally just essentially laughing at his dad and mocking his dad. So Shem and Japheth, goes to the tent, walking there backwards, covers his dad up. His dad wakes up, but either way, he woke up, he was mad. He was asking questions. He was like, what happened last night? Would you like to enlighten me and tell me what happened? So once he was asking, and inquiring what all happened, once he realized what happened to him, he was mad. So it's just like, okay, it's like, you want to do this, huh? Okay. It may not touch you, but it's going to touch your son and it's going to touch his lineage. That man said Canaan is going to be a servant to his brethren. It says that in Genesis 9:25 verses 27, if you're looking for that scripture, he basically says, Canaan is a wrap for you. I thank the God of Shem and Japheth, which is basically like God above. But he didn't say Ham. He did not say Ham. And then there's other theories that people have made pertaining to that about how Ham's wife had Nephilim genes, and all Nephilims are basically just angels and human women having intercourse. And it doesn't make it any better that, pertaining to that, those women that slept with those angels were heavily deified. So there's rumors about that. You have people making rumors about incest and all types of stuff, but those are literally just like speculation. But at the grand scheme of things, Ham was messy boots, and Ham was super disrespectful towards his dad, essentially mocking his daddy. Like, that's enough for anybody to be mad. Like, imagine being at your most vulnerable and somebody's evil enough to mock you and expose that to other people. Not to mention, pertaining to race now, um, Noah and his family were already black. It doesn't make any sense for somebody to be cursed and mysteriously, whoa, and next thing you know, they're black. That makes no sense at all. Noah and his family were already black. It just so happens that Canaan's lineage were also dark skinned. But in
Okay, so hello. It is Editing Kim here. I wanted to add like one more thing pertaining to Shem, Ham, and Japhet. So they are responsible for a good portion of all of the ethnicities that, we see today. And here are some of them. But at the time, as the whole, Curse of Canaan thing, was going on, this is like Genesis 9 and 10. Like humanity was slowly starting to evolve, but it wasn't quite getting there yet.
that happens later on down the line. Nimrod is the one that was responsible, for the Tower of Babel. And in the Tower of Babel, it's not a leaning tower of Pisa. It's actually a ziggurat. And they had a lot of ziggurats during like the Sumerian time period, where they had the Sumerian text and buildings and so forth. But anyways, so they put slime on the ziggurat or whatever. They're like, all right, we're finna call Tinky Tulipop down and get him to bless this land. And God was like, you thought you ate? He ain't even real for real. So, and then he was like, okay, so you're trying to build this tower, you're trying to do all this, huh? Okay, bet. Wow. So next thing you know, everybody couldn't speak the same language anymore. Everybody couldn't speak the same language anymore. So the Tower of Babel was what kick-started culture and race as we know it. And it got to a point of where, people were migrating and going to different areas and different lands, and things of that nature. And it also says it in Genesis 10:25 that the land separated or broke apart during the days of Peleg, or during the time of Peleg. And on top of that, um race started to change and evolve depending on what areas, that you lived in, that have the most UV radiation or the least UV radiation. Like, for example, even scientists have predicted that people that live like right where the equator is are typically indigenous people or dark skinned people, and the people that live far away from the equator, um they are typically light skinned, or they have a way like super light skin complexion due to the lack of vitamin D, or they don't really take in a lot of UV radiation. So if you live somewhere like Africa or anywhere where that sun is metro booming, you have to have a layer of pigment or something that protects you from the sun. Otherwise, you're gonna be cooked like a piece of bacon. So at this point, race never mattered. At this point, we were still technically the same race, but we all had different skin pigments. And later on down the line, when people started giving names to different races and so forth, but that I'm gonna get to that later. So culture starts to form at this point. So culture back then was what language you spoke, what your occupation is, and what deity or whatever that your country served. Like, for example, you know how like in the States, every state in the US is known for a specific thing. Like Wisconsin is known for cheese. This state is known for this, that state is known for that. So think of that, but for nations. This nation was known for this. This nation was known for being full of blacksmiths or something. This nation is known for this. This nation is known for that. That's how everything was set up back then. So not only was Canaan cursed, but hold up. Yeah, so not only was Canaan cursed, but Egypt was also in some kind of curse as well. because the very moment, for hundreds of years, when the Israelites, well, when Egypt, were enslaving all of these people and they were eventually freed, and the Pharaoh was killed. I believe it was this Pharaoh that was the ruler around the time that the Exodus was happening. Shortly after that, a few years later, Egypt went through a huge drought. I'm talking 150 plus years. And then it got to a point, they had food shortages and all types of stuff. And it got to a point where everybody they potentially had beef with came in and took over. I'm talking the Kushites, the Nubians, Assyrians, Greeks, Persians, everybody. So years down the line, everybody, like all the nations are beefing. Israel has this habit of, come to God, leaving God, come to God, leaving God, and then they're also beefing with people. Everybody beefing with them. They beefing with everybody. All these nations are just clashing at this point. So then later on down the line, the concept of race is, has evolved in all these different races and so forth have evolved, and societies have formed and all types of stuff, and they all got names at this point. So it gets to a point of where slave trades start to happen.
Okay, hi. So this is editing Kim. I think it's like one something in the morning. This is like the day after because I'm still editing. So something I want to add before I basically transition into the discussions about the transatlantic slave trade. So before this is going on, slavery was already a man-made established system in ancient times. Sadly, they did have chattel slavery, but I gotta bring the Bible in there some kind of way. You already know. But chattel slavery in the Bible is actually a no-no. A lot of people would be like, the Bible was fine. We didn't know it wasn't. It says in Exodus 21:16, you kidnap and sell somebody into slavery, you were to be put to death. Yeah, you were supposed to die, like point blank, period. So it's like I wanted to say that, and then also one of the earliest forms of slavery, during those times were like in Egypt, Mesopotamia, Babylon, and so forth. So I wanted to say that before we transition and really talk about this, because I'm not gonna lie, every now and then I be having to pray about specific things, whether it's like slave movies or watching his stuff about like history from the past, because I'm not gonna hold you, every time I see something or I watch something about the transatlantic slave trade or slavery, such as Roots, I be feeling myself getting mad. So I'll say that. So it's like I wanted to paint an idea of what the world was like before, the transatlantic slave trade took place.
So here's the sad part. So the earliest form of racism that's like recorded was during the time of the Middle Ages, which ironically was getting closer to the time that the slave trades really started to kick off. So, it was a bunch of people that were being sold in these slave trades, but one of the most infamously known slave trades was the transatlantic slave trade. And the crazy part about it is you have people, whenever we do talk about the transatlantic slave trade, you have people that will say, but the Africans sold their own. They didn't sell them. They didn't sell their own because they were black. They sold them to get money in their pockets, because in the grand scheme of things, you'll be surprised at what people do for some chingle. You'll be surprised. If people will sell their soul for a bag of chips, are you surprised that people will sell their own for some chingle, for some money, some moolah, some cheddar, some cheese? No, you shouldn't be surprised. So, because at this point, it wasn't just, it wasn't just the Europeans that was participating in some of this stuff.
Okay, I'm sorry for just constantly jumping in like this. But whenever I didn't say specific points, I gotta jump in and bring that point on home. But what I mean by there were other nations that were, a part of the slave trades over in Africa and those, in similar areas. It wasn't just the transatlantic slave trade, even though the transatlantic slave trade really jump started, I mean boosted that thing essentially. Something There are other slave trades that people don't talk about as much, because as messed up as the transatlantic slave trade is, what a lot of people don't talk about as much is the Arabian slave trade. I mean, we're talking, they also sold Africans into slavery along with Europeans. I mean, we have the Indian Ocean slave trade, the Red Sea slave trade. Um, they're right here. They're all right here. But let's get back. Let's get back to the original video. Thank you.
The people that was dealing with the repercussions of it the hardest, in my opinion, were Africans. So all of these people are being stuffed in these dingy boats and are being sailed over to Brazil, sailed over to Europe, sailed over to the pretty much the Caribbean islands, sailed over to the US, sailed over to all of these places. And you have people that say that, oh, it talks about this in Deuteronomy and so forth. But I feel like, in my opinion, it talks about it a little more in Isaiah. Because there's some inconsistencies pertaining to it being in Deuteronomy, but I don't know. I could be wrong. Like I said, I don't ever want to put nothing in nobody's mouth, and not even God's mouth, that they or he didn't even say. So, all of this, I mean, brutal. I'm talking babies were used as alligator baits the same way that the Egyptians were using Hebrew Israelite babies as alligator bait. And then, just like the Egyptians made the Hebrew Israelites build literally build towers and all this other stuff of the very rulers that were enslaving them, the slaves were essentially made to do all of this stuff in dedication of their slave owners. And I mean, people was getting skinned, and their skin was turned into chair covers and stuff. And you have slaves whose teeth were taken out, and you had people like George Washington and other people using their teeth. I mean, gruesome, gruesome stuff. And it's crazy how some of the things that happened in the transatlantic slave trade, they have similarities to some of the things that happened during the times of during the times that the Egyptians were enslaving the Hebrews. So, all of this stuff happens, and it's like, as a result, everything that Black people has ever faced at this point, a good portion of it all started from the transatlantic slave trade. Now that I've talked about from then to now, let's break the points down. Let's break it on down, because I feel like there's a lot to discuss, and there's a lot to really just bring to the table here. All right, so the first point that I have is, I feel like this isn't necessarily just like a Black community thing. I feel like this is just the individual thing for every single one of us that are Black or just other people. So, prime example, right? So every other day I see, on social media, and it gets to a point to where I eventually have to log off because some of this stuff is overwhelming. There's times where I go on social media and people are hooting and hollering and arguing about single Black baby mamas are ruining the Black community. and just all kinds of stuff. And there's people blaming this person and that person blaming that person. And I'm just like, I hate to be that person. Actually, I'd love to be that person. The things that you are blaming, a lot of people have no physical or spiritual understanding of a lot of things. So as a result, they try to understand things from their own perspective. And it says in the Bible, lean not to your own understanding, because there's some things that we hear a concept of, but we don't fully understand it. So the thing is, they hear somebody say something, and because it sounds good in their mind, they're like, yeah, that's got to be the reason. That's got to be the reason. Not knowing that they're placing blame. They're placing blame in the wrong areas. Because in the grand scheme of things, single moms in the Black community are not the reason why the Black community is failing, or it's not the reason why the Black community has been broken up. There's a lot of natural reasons, and there's a good portion of spiritual reasons. But it's like, just because you don't know the legitimate answer, that doesn't mean you have the right to blame innocent people for very huge problems. The mentalities that we harbor and the media that we consume that contain those, ideologies, in my opinion, that's one thing that I feel like that hurts the Black community, and that causes the Black community to be as separated as possible. Because I have seen a good portion of people consume red pill content, especially pro-Black red pill content. And you have people, at first, that they weren't on that type of timing at all, and they considered themselves to be zeros or whatever, and then they consume so much of that stuff that overnight, or just maybe months to years down the line, the more they consumed that kind of content, it changed what mentalities and what things that they thought about. They went from thinking about things logically to basically blaming women and, everybody else for things that they didn't even cause. Now they're out here spitting dangerous rhetoric that has the potential to negatively affect the youth. Yeah. I see it. I see it all the time. I see it all the time on social media, even on TikTok. When before I started just clicking not interested on some of those lives, I'll click in them. I'll click in them and just listen. And oh my goodness, like, the more I listened to it, I was getting annoyed, because I'm just like, this is coming from a place of inferiority and pride. Because in the grand, like, I keep saying grand scheme of things, I gotta say something else, but it's like, at the end of the day, pride will cause people to act like they know everything, and pride will cause people to not acknowledge their faults and their wrongs. And then on top of that, another thing that I noticed so much of is a lot of people, and it's literally the same thing with ideologies and mentalities and generalizations as well. Especially a lot of the things that we do sometimes as a race, it has nothing to do with us doing it because we're Black. It's more so because it is an individual thing that we have been taught or told about our race. For example, that's where, hold on, I gotta scratch my arm. That's where a lot of the stereotypes come from. Like, for example, you have people of all races that have been deadbeat daddies, that have been single moms, that have been, using welfare or whatever the case may be. But because so many people see us doing it, sadly, in their mind, they automatically put us in that box because they maybe saw a few people do it. Like there's a lot of people that commit crimes. There's people of all races that commit crimes, but because they see specific people doing it so much, and because in their mind they have already been told specific things about a specific race, they pit those things and put all of us or just a specific demographic in that box. And that's dangerous because you have to be mindful to understand that crime is a thing, that specific things are a thing, and that any individual has the ability to do that. That has nothing to do with race. That has everything to do with specific individuals. But because we have been painted a certain way and people put specific things onto us, people think, oh, that's the black experience, or oh, this is what black people are. When in actuality, crime ain't got nothing to do with race. Being a deadbeat ain't got nothing to do with race. Being a single mom ain't got nothing to do with race. It's all in the mind. It's all in the mentalities of that individual person, along with the media and other people that they're listening to or that they consume. And that's what a lot of people are failing to understand. Even super dangerous stereotypes like the chicken and watermelon thing. Like, I don't care what nobody says, I'll buzz down some watermelon in a hot minute. I got some watermelon earrings right now. And chicken is busting too. But but because of the specific fact that it's just you, when you really take the time to think about it and you look up the origins of some of these stereotypes, it has everything to do with the fact that somebody made it up and then put black people in that box. So now black people are specifically known for that specific thing. Y'all may not like me for the second thing.